Euphoria is such a strange experience. It is a fantastic show, like, let me be clear about that. The cast and crew are super talented, the music is incredible, the storytelling and cinematography are super creative and compelling, and then the dialogue and plot are very entertaining. But, like, it's also diabolical and traumatizing in every sense. Rewatching the show actually made me super excited for season 3, which comes out on April 12th, just a few days from now. And you know what? I forgot how much I liked Euphoria, despite all of its fuckassery. We're gonna cover it all today: the lore, the fandom, the cast drama. The first season of Euphoria premiered in June of 2019. That's already 7 years ago. That is crazy. There were 8 episodes in this first season, all about an hour long. Every episode of the show thus far is like an hour long, I think. A little over a year later, we got 2 special episodes, one at the end of 2020 and one at the beginning of 2021. And then a year after that, we got season 2, which again was 8 episodes and premiered in January of 2022. They air 1 episode a week, aka Euphoria Sundays, and I think I only got caught up to the live premieres during like the last 2 episodes of season 2. So, you know, I'm newer to the scene, but don't worry, at this point I feel pretty well versed in terms of the lore and like the cast drama and everything. The storytelling in Euphoria is very cool. It's something that I definitely admire. It jumps back and forth in time, it jumps between different characters, but everything is also very cohesive. In season 1, each episode is centered around a different character. It doesn't focus on this character the entire time, and it's also narrated by the main character, Rue, so you know we always have her perspective and input, but it is a nice way to be introduced to this pretty large cast. First, like I said, we have the main character, Rue, and her family. She has a mom, a dad, and a younger sister named Gia. When Rue was 13, her dad died after battling cancer, and seeing him deteriorate before her eyes on top of pre-existing mental health problems contributed to her decision to start stealing her dad's medication to get high. She got addicted to opiates, and this strained her relationship with her mom and sister in particular, and also her friends, especially her longtime best friend Lexi. And then when Rue was 16, I think this was the summer before her junior year of high school, she overdosed in her room, and Gia was the one who found her, and she was hospitalized and then sent to rehab. Rue as a character is very quiet, you know, and caring, but also very troubled. She struggles with anxiety and depression, among other things, and can get very violent and angry at times, usually like when her mom or sister are accusing her of using. Now let's move on to the Howard family. This is the family of Rue's longtime best friend Lexi. So there's Lexi, her older sister that's 1 year older than her, named Cassie, and then their parents. Their mom and dad seem to have a pretty strained relationship and eventually got divorced. The mom turned to alcohol, and after getting into a life-threatening car crash, the dad turned to painkillers. The dad would flirt with other women, and the mom may have cheated. Like, there's possible infidelity on both sides. I'm not exactly sure about that. But anyways, Cassie was a major daddy's girl and even let him steal belongings from their house in secret so he could get money to fuel his drug addiction, despite the fact that he and Cassie at that point didn't even have a relationship anymore. But that's all to say that her dad leaving was very hard for Cassie. And Cassie on the surface seems very sweet and innocent. She's very boy crazy, saying that her biggest goal in life is to love and be loved. She's also been sexualized from a very young age because of her figure. Lexi lives in her sister's shadow a bit. She's more of the passive, smart, observant type, and she's kind of a goody two-shoes and a rule follower. Then we have Maddie, who became besties with Cassie. Maddie is very confident, a baddie diva, not afraid to instigate and get into a fight and win. I believe she's an only child. She gets into a relationship with this guy named Nate, and even though it's super toxic, she prefers a relationship like this where there's like a push-pull, on-again, off-again sort of dynamic, because at the very least, it's passionate. Seeing her parents barely even talk to each other made her want a relationship that's the exact opposite of whatever that is. Nate Jacobs on the surface is the classic popular boy trope. He's the quarterback of the football team, popular, and is from a powerful, wealthy family, but he starts displaying some like low-key psychopathic behaviors and has intense anger issues. He has an older brother, a mom, and a dad named Cal. Cal is a main character as well, but you know, we'll get into him and his relationship with Nate and that whole thing later because there's a lot to unpack there. And then we have Kat. She's Maddie's best friend, but like Cassie, Lexi, Maddie, Kat, and Rue are all in a friend group of sorts. Some people are closer than others, obviously. There's also this girl named Bibi who is a part of the group, even though she's like kind of barely shown on screen, but the fandom loves her because she's kind of fun and iconic. And then Kat's big thing is that she got fat in middle school after she took, or maybe it was elementary school, after she took a trip to Jamaica and had copious amounts of virgin pina coladas, which first of all, so real. Kat is like the nerdier one of the group. She's insecure and struggles a lot with self-identity and the idea of being both fat and desirable. She also wrote, unbeknownst to all of her friends, a famous Larry fanfic, which is kind of hilarious. We don't learn a lot about her family, but her mom seems sweet. And then finally we have Jules. She's the new girl in school. Her vibes are very whimsical and artsy, and she catches the eyes of quite a few characters. She seems like a free spirit, but potentially that could be the case because she's kind of running from her past. I think when she was younger, she struggled struggled a lot with self-harm, which I think led her mom to admit her to a psych ward against her will. And then in high school, Jules just lives with her dad, and they have a pretty good relationship, it seems. She doesn't have any relationship with her mom, and it's implied that it's largely due to this incident. And then in one of the special episodes, we also learn a little bit more about how her mom struggled with addiction, and that's another reason why they don't have a relationship. Also, Jules is trans, and potentially her mom wasn't as accepting of that. Okay, so in Euphoria, everyone has their separate things going on, but then there's usually a big event. Most often it's a party where everybody congregates, and this kind of grounds us as viewers, giving us a place and time where storylines and characters intersect. And the first of these events is a back to school party, which this football player and friend of Nate named McKay is throwing. And since it's a new school year, we have people turning over a new leaf and changing things up. Love a good fresh start. So I mentioned in a previous video, one of my goals this year is to take care of myself more, which includes eating healthier, health maxing if you will. And what's really helped me stay consistent with this goal is HelloFresh, the sponsor of today's video. The big hurdle was that I always thought I hated cooking. I thought it wasn't for me, and that resulted in me going out to eat a lot, which isn't the move expense-wise or health-wise. The thing is though, I realized that I don't actually dislike cooking. I dislike the hassle of going grocery shopping and doing all of the meal planning. But with HelloFresh, you get delicious meal kits delivered right to your door. It's hassle-free. Basically, it lets you skip to the good part, which is the cooking and eating. The other day, I decided to make pan-seared sirloin steak and rosemary potatoes with creamed Parmesan spinach and balsamic fig pan sauce. It was simply divine. As you can see, you don't have to think about grocery trips or portion sizes or forgetting an ingredient. Everything you need for a scrumdiddlyumptious meal is ready and waiting. You'll also never get bored. There's tons of variety with over 100 recipes to choose from. And if you're like me and low-key have a little bit of a commitment issues problem, don't worry about that either, because you can pause, skip weeks, or swap meals. No pressure, babe. HelloFresh has helped me enjoy cooking, which in turn helps me live a healthier lifestyle. Use my code ToddHunterFM at HelloFresh.com for 10 free meals plus free shipping. Free meals applied as a discount on the first box. Newer returning subscribers only. Varies by plan. So sign up today by clicking the link in the description box below, or again, use my code ToddHunterFM at HelloFresh.com. Thank you so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to it. Let me set the scene for the events leading up to this party. So, Rue just got out of rehab, and on the drive home, she sees Jules for the first time riding her bike and is immediately captivated by her. Later on, we find out that Jules is on this gay dating app and looking for guys to hook up with on the DL, and since she's new in town, she's got a lot of options to choose from. She ends up matching with a guy with the username Dominant Daddy. She meets him in a motel, and it's this older guy who ends up fucking her very aggressively. And so she's over there doing that, and then McKay is the guy who's throwing this party, and he's actually Cassie's boyfriend. It's a new relationship, but they seem happy, and McKay gets a little shit from the other football players and his friends because Cassie has dated a lot of guys in the school, and a lot of guys have videos of them having sex, and they've shown it to everybody, so that's gone around, and Cassie knows this but continues to say yes whenever guys ask to film her, and them doing the deed, because she loves them and wants to please them, I guess. Anyways, it's a source of insecurity for McKay because he's seeing what all these other dudes get up to with her, and it's also the idea of getting someone who's kind of been around, all of that is kind of a source of insecurity for him, and a little bit of a source of tension in their relationship. So then we get to this party. Nate and Maddie have, like I said, a toxic on again off again relationship, and currently they had broken up and are playing these jealousy games with each other. Maddie even goes so far as to have sex with some random guy in the pool in front of everyone. Kat, meanwhile, made the spontaneous decision to lose her virginity to some random loser guy. After hooking up with Dominant Daddy, Jules goes to the party and immediately gets harassed by Nate. He was all does anybody know who the fuck Jules is? Who invited her? And no one answered, obviously, because she's new, and literally her first experience at the school is being humiliated in front of everyone. But then she grabs a knife, cuts herself, and starts threatening him, and he gets scared and backs off. Now, the reason that Nate immediately locked in on Jules is because he's attracted to her. However, he also somehow knows that Jules is trans, immediately off the bat, and Nate is disgusted at himself for being attracted. The internalized homophobia is strong with this one. And after witnessing the interaction between Jules and Nate, Rue goes up to her and introduces herself, and then the two leave the party together. So that's pretty much the tea with the party. Rue and Jules immediately form this sort of codependent bond, arguably Rue more so than Jules. Rue is completely in love and infatuated with Jules and wants to spend every single second of every single day with her. Jules, on the other hand, has quickly fallen in love with this other guy that she met on the same dating app. And this guy's username is Shy Guy, and she then learns after, exchanging text messages back and forth with him that his name is Tyler. And this is a completely online relationship for a minute. Like, she doesn't even know what his face looks like. They never FaceTime or like go hop on a phone call or anything. Like, it's solely through texts. They do, however, sext and exchange nudes. His is just his dick though, whereas she does this whole elaborate nudes photo shoot and requests Rue to be the photographer, so like they do that whole thing. And Jules's face is definitely in those photos. Nate, meanwhile, is trying to win Maddie back, and we learn that Nate has these weird stipulations regarding women and relationships. Like, he likes the fact that Maddie is super feminine and like has no body hair and is innocent and needs to be protected. And the whole innocent and needs to be protected part isn't necessarily true for Maddie. Like, she's lied about how many guys she's like been with, but he likes that overall, innocent image of her. As such, he decides to stalk the random guy that Maddie had sex with in the pool at McKay's party, break and enter into his apartment, accuse the guy of raping her because he was 22 and she was 17, and then he beats him to a frickin' pulp, which is, a completely normal and natural response, right? And not indicative of someone who like seriously needs help. Then Maddie and Nate officially get back together, and she doesn't know that he did all of this. She's like completely none the fucking wiser. However, shortly after that, Maddie is going through Nate's phone and finds a bunch of other guys' dick pics in his camera roll, which definitely, gave her some food for thought. Kat finds out that the guy that she lost her virginity to recorded and posted it without her knowledge, and people were watching it and spreading it, so she did everything in her power to shut that rumor down real fast, and you better believe she was successful. Yeah, she took care of business. However, after seeing the success that her video did on Pornhub, she decided to create an account herself and recruited a roster of sugar daddies, one of which has a micropenis and a degrading kink. So some of these sentences might give you an aneurysm, but just like bear with me. Kat also gives herself a bad bitch makeover and changes her personality to like fit the aesthetic that she's trying to curate. She also meets this guy named Ethan who is really sweet, and he, forms a crush on her. And their first meeting was so funny because he walks into class and sits next to her and says, "Hi, I'm Ethan," and she immediately to his face says, "Please don't be a mass shooter." So then let me introduce you to some new characters. We've got Fezco and Ashtray, who are adoptive brothers and drug dealers. Fezco is a sweet guy at heart, but can also take care of business in the drug dealing world because he's had to take care of himself and Ashtray from a very young age when his grandma fell into a coma. He's very protective and caring of his family, and Ashtray is literally like 10 years old, or maybe he's 12, which is funny because like he's also a drug dealer and acts the part. Fezco is like Rue's older brother as well, and she hangs out at his place a lot. One such time she goes over but gets caught up in this like really super scary drug deal with this guy named Mouse, and Mouse is a really dangerous dude that you don't want to mess with, and he ends up pressuring Rue to take fentanyl, and I think Fezco ends up bringing her to Jules after like Rue is super out of it, and Jules helps take care of her. And after witnessing all of this, Jules tells Rue that she doesn't want to be around Rue if Rue is still using, and we later find out from the special episode that Jules has had bad experiences regarding drug use, with her mom, so it's a particularly sensitive subject for her. And after that, Rue decides to get clean. She's like, you know what, that was a super scary ordeal, like I'm gonna get clean for Jules, because she doesn't want to lose her also. She had actually started using the day she got back from rehab, but was hiding it from everybody, so not a great start, but never too late to start trying again. And one of the people who also knew about, her slip-ups with regarding drug use again is her like mentor figure named Ali. And I guess I didn't know this when I first watched the show, but it's freaking Coleman Domingo. How cool is that? Anyways, Rue is mostly successful in her sobriety when she's around Jules. However, when Jules isn't around is when she slips. So now we get our second big event that all of these characters show up at, which is the carnival. So even though Kat is on her hoe arc and having sex with random men frequently, she runs into Ethan at the carnival, and the two are really vibing and having a good time until she sees him talking to some pretty blonde girl and gets insecure about that and ditches him. For a while after that, she doesn't even explain what happened to Ethan, and he is very confused because the conversation between him and that blonde girl was completely platonic. I think they were either co-workers or she was his sister's co-worker or something like that. But anyway, so like he's completely in the dark, and Kat just like ditched him randomly and he has no idea why. Jules and Rue got into a fight before the carnival because Jules told Rue that she was going to meet up with Shy Guy Tyler at the carnival, and Rue didn't think that it was safe because like stranger danger, And then after that fight, Rue came over to apologize, and at when they were making up, she ended up kissing Jules, and that kind of made things awkward, so Rue left in a hurry. And then at the carnival, the two reunited and made up, and the two kind of just agreed to forget about that situation. But then this is where some big reveals happen. Us viewers, like if you were watching the show, you would already know this information, but I've purposefully hid it from you so that I could do this sort of big reveal thing right now so that you learn along with the characters. Nate Jacobs and his family, particularly his dad Cal, participate in this chili cook-off at the carnival, and they take it very seriously. Jules and Rue see the chili booth, and Jules sees Cal at the chili booth, and she's like, oh my god. That man right there, that's Dominant Daddy. That is Dominant Daddy, aka the guy I hooked up with at the motel. And Rue immediately is like, no, there's no way. She immediately doesn't believe her because that's Cal Jacobs. He's the picturesque family man, rich, toxically masculine king of the town. And so, to prove it, Jules went up and ordered a cup of chili, which Cal dropped because he was so shook that he was seeing Jules again, especially in front of his wife and kids. And, you know, this whole interaction, it definitely convinced Rue because he did look visibly shaken. And so later on, Cal tracks down Jules and begs her and Rue not to say anything, and he didn't know that Jules was 17 at the time of their hookup. Jules lied and said she was 22, so like he's in that sort of a pickle now as well. Then, as planned, after the carnival, Jules goes to meet up with the love of her life, supposedly, Shy Guy Tyler, and guess what? It is none other than Cal's son, aka Nate frickin' Jacobs. So, now I need to fill you in on some of the lore that I skipped out on before. Basically, when Nate was like around the age of 12, he found something in his dad's office, a desk drawer full of CDs. When he watched these CDs, he saw that it was sex tapes of Cal's motel escapades. Now, this was extremely traumatizing for Nate, obviously, and partially explains why he is the way he is. So anyways, Nate saw Jules' CD, took it, and then blackmails her by saying if Jules says anything about this situation or accuses his dad of anything, he'll get her arrested for child pornography because of her own nudes that she sent to him, because again, Jules is 17. So she's heartbroken and betrayed because what do you mean the guy that I fell in love with is Nate Jacobs, the asshole, you know what I mean? And also this partially explains why Nate had so many dick pics in his phone, because he was using them to catfish Jules. So then Jules goes over to Rue's house for a sleepover and they kiss for real this time. Meanwhile, Cal is realizing his CD for Jules isn't in the drawer and he is freaking out. And then returning back to the carnival, Cassie and McKay are a little rocky because of the aforementioned tension and problems that they were having, but then things get even worse when they go up to the Jacobs chili booth and McKay says he and Cassie are just chilling instead of dating when he's talking to Nate's family, and this got Cassie pissed, obviously rightfully so, and she storms off. And then I think a little bit before this, Nate found Maddie at the carnival and didn't like the way that she was dressed because in his words she looked like a hooker and he wanted her to look respectable in front of his parents because like this is the big chili cook-off, bitch. Like, we can't mess around. So, Cassie and Maddie are both pissed, and they find each other and decide to buy Molly from Ashtray. They decide to take it and go their separate ways. Cassie gets on the merry-go-round and kisses this guy named Daniel. She then starts masturbating by accident on the merry-go-round in front of everybody. Yikes. Meanwhile, Maddie confronts Nate's parents with this iconic line. Yeah, I'm not supposed to be here right now because I'm dressed like a hooker and none of you like me. And then she spills Cal's tub of prize-winning chili and Nate drags her away to an abandoned area, slams her up against a thing, and chokes her. And so then in retaliation, she confronts him about the dick pics, which makes Nate very distraught. He's like, oh my god, I could explain, like, it's so, like, I can't even explain, it's so complicated. And she's like, what's complicated about it, bitch? Like, sexuality is a spectrum. At the carnival, Maddie confided in Cassie about the dick pics, but then later on, Cassie brought it up to her at school, and then Maddie hit her with another iconic line. I don't know if your brain is all scrambled from like all the Molly you take, but I never said that. And then the day after the carnival, Maddie had severe bruising on her neck from the strangulation, which she tried to cover up, and she ended up fainting in class, and that was unrelated to the bruising though, and people discovered her bruising, which led to an investigation obviously, and the principal was trying to get the story straight from other students, which resulted in a very funny montage. And then the principal ended up figuring out that Nate Jacobs was likely the perpetrator because there were multiple witnesses, I think, at least of him dragging her off. So the principal called in Maddie and Nate's parents, and at first Cal thought he was being called in because of Jules and was very distraught, and Maddie's mom decided to press charges against Maddie's will, and Nate got a temporary suspension even though he never once admitted to literally anyone that he did it. Like, I don't even think he admitted it to himself. Like, it was kind of a weird situation where he seemed to genuinely believe later on that he never did that when he actually did. But anyways, Maddie was super upset that Nate was being punished for his actions, and the reason for that was because she really liked being in a relationship with him. He did all the boyfriend things like getting her gifts and treating her like a princess, and she made him feel good in return. And you know, they both have their toxic sides. She hooked up with other guys whenever they were on a break, and you know, he beats up said guys by breaking into their home. naturally. But it's a vicious cycle where Maddie knows that Nate can be violent and cruel, of course, but no matter what he did, she would still love him. And I think this is a common thing where she is mistaking passion for love, and she thinks that since he would kill for her and she would kill for him, that they share this ultimate bond that she can't let go of, when really, like, it's really, really toxic and not healthy at all and not good for either of them. Then, in secret, Nate and Maddie would meet once a week at a motel to hook up. So Maddie, throughout all of this, is in a really, really bad mental place, and she tries to call on her friends, particularly Kat, for help, but Kat's in her hoe era and would rather suck some random guy's dick in a mall parking lot. So then we get to the next canon event, the Halloween party. This party is thrown by Daniel, aka the guy that Cassie was kissing on the merry-go-round, and now you may be like, Amanda, well, isn't Cassie still dating McKay? Like, isn't she cheating on him? Well, yes, of course she is. And during this Halloween party, Cassie and McKay were in an even worse place because there was an incident where, as a part of like a hazing ritual to get into a frat, McKay was basically sexually assaulted and humiliated in front of Cassie when they were mid hooking up, and then they had this really weird, intense, and aggressive sex afterwards. Also, McKay doesn't like when Cassie like dresses like a hoe, which pisses her off, of course. So she and McKay arrive to Daniel's Halloween party separately, and before McKay even gets there, she starts dancing and making out with Daniel, which doesn't count as cheating for some reason because they aren't going that far, which, okay, whatever, not true. McKay almost catches them together, but Lexi intervenes. However, since Cassie won't go all the way with Daniel, you know, he is a very big asshole, but he also does, in this moment, low-key read her to filth with an iconic monologue that ends with, "God, you are so fucking boring." So then, because things didn't work out with Cassie, Daniel turns to Kat to get his hookup fill, which was a full circle moment for her because she actually dated him in middle school, but he broke up with her when she got fat, and when she brought this up, though, he had literally no recollection of that, so that is rough. Before this, though, Kat and Ethan kiss in the bathroom after the carnival ghosting incident, but, you know, he did finish in his pants, you know, kind of prematurely, and when he went to clean himself off, Kat ditched him. And, you know, thoughts and prayers for Ethan, because he just keeps getting done so dirty by Kat left and right, and she also virgin shamed him, so justice for Ethan. Anyways, Rue and Jules are in a bad place because Jules is struggling under the weight of being, like, the anchor for Rue's sobriety, on top of Nate blackmailing her, and on top of stuff that was happening with her mom that we as viewers didn't really know about yet. But Rue is in the dark about all of this and thinks that Jules is only drinking like crazy during this Halloween party because of her. And then Nate and Maddie show up at the party together. They make their like grand entrance and appearance, and Nate is officially exonerated from his crime because he framed the guy that Maddie fucked in the pool at that party and made him turn himself in. He also used the same blackmailing strategy on Jules so that she would lie to the police and say that she witnessed Tyler doing that. I should mention that the guy that Nate framed and beat up and like was literally terrorizing, his name was Tyler. So Nate was literally playing chess. Then Cassie finds out she's pregnant, and she tells McKay, and he doesn't take it well at first, and then she goes to get an abortion. And I don't think she really even tells any of her friends about it. Now, Fez threatened Nate after Rue mentioned that Nate was being an asshole to her and Jules, so Nate had Fez's house raided, and Fez needed to flush all of the drugs down the toilet, and then to recoup the money that he lost from doing that, he robbed this rich guy's house in front of his kid's son, which was kind of traumatizing for everybody involved. But anyways, Maddie and Nate are back together, and after they had sex, Maddie brought up the dick pics again, which caused Nate to get violent and defensive again. And so then when he went to take a shower, she was snooping through things and found a CD that Nate was hiding in a book, and unbeknownst to her, it was the CD of Cal and Jules, and she watched it later when she got home and was super shook. So now, anyways, Maddie and Nate are low-key broken up again. Cal and Nate's relationship is as complicated and unhealthy as ever. Cal admitted in a moment of weakness to one of his random motel hookups that the rage inside of his sons scares him, and he feels like he caused that because he's been hiding part of himself for so long. And Cal and Nate actually got into a physical fight, and Nate started slamming his head against the ground, which again really scared Cal. Cal is an interesting character because he is scary, but like low-key Nate is scarier. Then we have the final event of the season, prom. Nate and Maddie are doing their jealousy shenanigans. Nate literally walked by her actually gripping some random girl's literal booty cheek that was hanging out in the open, and then they were dancing and sort of had their heated rivalry club core moment, and Kat and Ethan make up and get together for real after clearing up all the miscommunication, which was like their one sweet moment that they have together. And then Rue and Jules talk at prom. Jules had recently visited her hometown friend and revealed that she like low-key fell in in love with the hometown friend's friend that reminded her of Rue, even though Jules also admitted that she loves Rue as well. And Rue considered that to be cheating, and low-key it kind of was, but, you know, in an effort to be more spontaneous and to Jules' liking, Rue suggested running away with Jules together, and like they could go live together and live their happily ever after lives, but Rue backed out at the last moment. Jules, however, got on the train and followed through with the running away plan on her own and left Rue at the station, which caused Rue to relapse. And so the season ends with this relapse, which is visualized in a dance number to the song All For Us. Then we have the two special episodes. One featured a conversation in a diner between Rue and Ali, her sponsor/mentor, where she shared her perspective of the Jules train incident, and they also talked about the struggles of addiction and how that affects relationships. And the other episode featured predominantly a conversation between Jules and a therapist, where she shared her perspective of the train incident, and they also talked about Jules' relationship with gender and decentering men and her relationship with her mom. And now we get to season 2. This is where Ashtray starts acting really fucking weird. Like, I feel like they completely changed his character season 2, and low-key, I don't even think it was worth it. So the drug dealer that Fezco and Ashtray had been working with, named Mouse, was backing Fez into a corner, so Ashtray randomly, spontaneously, impulsively decided that the reasonable thing to do in that scenario was to straight up kill him. So Mouse is dead. Great. And so now Fez, Ashtray, and Rue, for some reason, have to go to this other drug dealer named Lori. Her vibes are sort of like an emotionless receptionist, and even though it was a pretty scary experience, Rue was super high and giggling about the matter after the fact, and Fez hits her with a line, and I don't know if some of these lines are iconic, but they were iconic among, like, literally me and my roommates when we first watched this, and he said, "Why are you acting like that shit was fun, Rue? For real, you're pissing me off. Acting dumb as fuck right now. God damn." All smiling and laughing and shit. So Mouse's right-hand man has a girlfriend named Faye who ends up living at Fezco's house because she got into some legal trouble, and Faye is kind of like a dumb LA influencer vibe, but she is very sweet. So then we have the first big event of the season, the New Year's party. Rue has relapsed and hasn't seen Jules since the train incident, and Rue arrives at the party with Fezco and Ashtray, and Jules arrives with a cunty bob and with Kat. Lexi and Cassie are supposed to arrive together, but they actually get into a fight, and Cassie literally got out of the car, I think on the side of the road, and she ends up running into Nate at a convenience store, who drives her to the party, and there's a lot of sexual tension in the car, and they ended up hooking up in the bathroom of the party. Maddie coincidentally starts banging on the bathroom door because she needs to pee, and almost finds out that Cassie is hiding in the bathtub and was just hooking up with Nate, but doesn't. And so basically at this point, Cassie and McKay are broken up because she broke up with him because she thought they were in two different places at life. And you know, this is sort of like after their problems and after the abortion, so I guess like she kind of wanted to go her separate ways. And then he came to the party briefly to have a conversation with her, but when she indirectly tells him that she was unfaithful during their relationship, aka referring to the stuff with Daniel, he leaves, never to be seen again for the rest of the season. And obviously none of these characters are perfect, but you know what, I liked McKay, so that was unfortunate for me personally. So then after Nate saw that Cassie and McKay had a conversation in private, and now he's all like possessive and territorial over Cassie, he got all weird with McKay and was like really interrogating him and asking him, he was like, you know, did you wear a condom when you fucked her? It was like really weird, crazy behavior. Anyways, Maddie and Nate at this point had also been broken up for 3 weeks, but they're still playing, you know, the jealousy games, and Nate is still in love with her, even though he has also now fallen in love with Cassie. I don't even know if it's accurate to say that he respects Cassie less than Maddie, because he also treats Maddie poorly, but it definitely seems like Nate is prioritizing Maddie. Rue, meanwhile, is avoiding Jules and looking for a place to do drugs, and she ends up running into this guy named Elliot in the laundry room who is also doing drugs, and so then Rue, she does drugs with him and goes into cardiac arrest, and Elliot has to save her, which is a crazy, you know, first impression of each other. But after that, they bond and are homies and are glad to have someone to do drugs with, even though they sort of know that this relationship isn't good for either of them, because, you know, they kind of feed into each other's bad habits. Jules and Rue eventually talk as well, and Rue says that she relapsed the night that Jules left, which was obviously super hard for Jules to hear, but eventually they kiss, they make up, and they start dating like for real. And now we get to an unlikely pair, Fezco and Lexi, who end up sitting and talking on the couch together for a while at this party. They're super cute, and when she left briefly, he was all like, "Where'd you go? I was starting to miss you." And she was like, "No, you're lying." And he was like, "Why would I lie? You're like the coolest person in here. Talking to you was one of the best parts of my whole year." Stop. top. Fesco gets her number and then immediately goes and gets super violent and freaking beats the shit out of Nate to get his revenge on him for having his place raided. And, you know, also, I think probably in part for messing with Rue and Jules. After this party, 2 different love triangles form. We've got the Nate, Cassie, Maddie love triangle, and then the Rue, Jules, Elliot love triangle. Maddie is completely in the dark about Cassie and Nate and is debating whether to take Nate back because he's trying really hard to win her back. And Jules is immediately jealous of Elliot when they first meet because she can tell that Elliot has a crush on Rue, which is true. But then Jules and Elliot start flirting and eventually hooking up unbeknownst to Rue, even though Elliot knows Jules and Rue are in a relationship, so that's really messy. And then Rue is also pretending to be sober, and the only one who knows that she's actively using is Elliot. So basically, after Nate got the shit beat out of him, Cal was like, who did this to you? Who did this to my boy? And Nate wouldn't say. And then Cal did his own investigation and determined that it was Fesco. And so when Cal confronted Nate about this, Nate was all like, you know what? Yeah, I guess he did beat me, but I was trying to protect you because Fesco knows that you fucked Jules and recorded it. So this is the first time that they're kind of like confronting each other about this shit. And so then Cal goes to Fesco's house and gets caught by Ashtray. And Fesco and Ashtray are interrogating Cal, and Cal is like, look, I just want the disc of me and Jules back. And Fesco is obviously confused because he doesn't have the disc, Maddie does. And so Fesco says, yo, you recorded that shit? And Cal was all like, I didn't know. And Fesco's like, you didn't know you were recording? Who the fuck even told you I gave a shit about this? And Cal was like, my son. And Fez was like, your son, the one that's in love with Jules? And Faye, who's been there this whole time overhearing, is like, aw, that's cute. And Fez is like, that's not cute, man. What the fuck? What kind of weird-ass father-son shit is going on around here, bro? And Cal is like, I'm extremely confused. And Fesco's like, you're confused? I'm fucking confused, bro. That is an iconic scene. Love it. Anyways, so Cal realizes that Nate lied to him, and Nate lied because, like I said, he knows that Maddie has the disc. Meanwhile, Lexi is starting to write a play about the lives of her and her friends because she wants to start taking risks and be less passive. And at the same time, Cassie is starting to become fucking insufferable with no shred of dignity or self-respect at all. Cassie starts waking up at 4 a.m. doing this whole elaborate beauty routine so that Nate will acknowledge her in some way at school, which of course he never does, and he only does even like at the very minimal level when she starts dressing exactly like Maddie. Then Cassie shows up one day looking like Dorothy, and we get another iconic scene where everybody is asking her why the fuck she looks like she's auditioning for Oklahoma, which they think it's the name of Lexi's play, but it's not. And they're all in the girls' bathroom, and Kat is like, why do you look like that? And Cassie asks, like, what? And Maddie says, like a country music star. And Cassie's like, in a good way or a bad way? And Maddie's like, bitch, you better be joking. Other things that are happening is that Maddie is on her babysitting arc, which was cute to see. Ethan and Kat are dating, and he's super sweet, but she thinks that he's too nice, and eventually they break up. But Kat lied about having a brain disorder as an excuse for breaking up to make herself seem like less of an asshole, but Ethan literally called her out for it, and she ended up looking like a major asshole anyway. Good riddance, Ethan, you were too good for her. So then Rue decided to go to Lori with a business opportunity because Fesco said no, and that got her in possession of a suitcase full of drugs, which obviously isn't smart to leave that in Rue's hands. She's obviously supposed to be selling these drugs and not using them, but she isn't really following through with that aspect of the plan. It starts becoming very clear that Rue is unwell, so Elliot lets it slip to Jules that Rue isn't sober. And Jules then tells Rue's mom, and together they confiscate the suitcase. And then when Rue finds out about this, she has one of her usual violent crash outs, except this was a really, really bad one. Like, she kicked down a door, and also is really bad because she realizes that she's in deep shit because now she owes a lot of money to, you know, this really scary drug dealer. And the whole time she actually didn't know that Jules and Elliot were also in the house overhearing everything. And this is a turning point for Rue because the people that she loves most are witnessing her at her lowest. So Rue agrees to go to the hospital, but her mom is secretly taking her to rehab, and when Rue realizes this, she freaks out and jumps out of the car and starts running away. Meanwhile, it's Maddie's birthday, and Maddie, Cassie, Kat, and Lexi are all at Cassie and Lexi's house, and Cassie and Nate are in a weird place because Cassie wants Nate all to herself, which obviously he does not want that because he still wants Maddie back, so that's not really working out. And then there's the scene where Cassie's all like, what you don't understand, Nate, is that I am crazier, as in crazier than Maddie. And Nate is all like, that's not something to be fucking proud of, Cassie. Cassie gets super drunk at this party, and then when Nate eventually comes over, she embarrasses herself by coming down in a bikini. Like, nobody was talking about going in the hot tub, but she decided to, I guess, like, spur that on. And, you know, it prompts everyone to get in the hot tub, and when she gets in, she falls on top of Nate when she enters the water. And then when Maddie and Nate start bickering, and Maddie lists all the sweet sweet nothings that Nate has been saying to her in order to win her back, Cassie starts throwing up on everybody. Now, to circle on back to Rue, when she's running away from her mom, she ends up at Lexi and Cassie's house when everybody's still there, but Cassie's mom alerts Rue's mom and they trap her into this sort of intervention with everybody there. And then to get out of that situation, Rue uses a piece of information that she had been holding on to, which was the fact that she knows that Nate and Cassie are a thing because she saw Cassie get into his truck and kiss him. So when Cassie tells Rue to take being sober one day at a time in sort of like in an obnoxiously naive sort of way, Rue says, "Hey Cassie, how long have you been fucking Nate Jacobs?" And then Maddie obviously goes crazy and berserk and is like, "You're fucking Nate? Are you kidding me? How long have you been fucking him? Rue? When was this?" And Rue goes, "Right after New Year's." And Maddie is all like, "You dumb fucking bitch, I'm gonna fuck you up." And then Maddie starts chasing after Cassie, and then everybody like starts going every which way, and in the commotion Rue escapes again. And as Rue is running through the streets and like being chased by the police and like going through withdrawal, she breaks and enters into some random person's house and steals a bunch of their money, and then reports back to Lori because, mind you, like I said, she's freaking out because she lost multiple thousands of dollars worth of drugs. So she eventually ends up at Lori's, and Lori is planning on trapping her there and using Rue to make up the money that she lost. But Rue ends up escaping again and returns home to her mom. Her mom helps her through Rue's withdrawal symptoms, and the hope of Rue going back to rehab is the thing that's keeping everyone going. But they find out that they don't have the space for Rue, and so she can't go. But luckily, because of all of this, Rue decides actually on her own to stay sober. So that's great, but now let's circle back to Cal. He's going through a crisis. The reputation he has been carefully curating is like breaking and slipping and deteriorating, and so he decides at this point that he has nothing to lose. And we learn that Cal was in love with his best friend. We get his backstory, and those feelings were actually mutual, but he got his future wife pregnant in high school, and so he felt like he had to commit to that, even though that's not really what he wanted. The love of his life was truly his best friend. And then he gets drunk, he gets kicked out of the gay bar that he kissed his best friend in all those years ago, and then when he gets home, he's super drunk. He pees all over the floor of the front door area, and his wife catches him and she's all like, "Are you peeing? What is wrong with you?" And Cal responds, "I think I'm lonely." And she's like, "Can you please put your penis away?" And he says, "No." And she says, "I'm not gonna ask you again." And he says, "I am who I am." His whole family is on the staircase looking down at him at this point, and he reveals to them that he started hooking up with guys while his wife was still pregnant with their first child. And then the oldest son, named Aaron, is low-key the only one who has been in the dark about like all of the stuff that Cal is revealing. And then right before Cal leaves, he drops this iconic line that says, "Aaron, the porn on your fucking computer made my jaw drop." And mind you, this is Cal saying that. And then he leaves, and while this is all going on, Nate finds out that Maddie found out about him and Cassie, and he realizes because he screwed Maddie over and embarrassed her, he realizes that there's no chance Maddie will take him back ever. So now he goes to Maddie's house and threatens to kill himself with a gun if Maddie doesn't give him the disc of his dad and Jules. And he's literally kissing her as he's pulling the trigger, as it's like against his head, and she doesn't know that there were no bullets loaded, but like still, that whole thing is so crazy and traumatizing. And then he then gives the disc to Jules and tries to make amends with her a little bit, I guess, and Jules ends up destroying the disc. And then he then tells Cassie to move in with him and his family, and she goes without literally any hesitation because she's stupid. And then it's time for the grand finale, which is Lexi's play. Maddie is the one to verbalize what her friends are all just realizing as they're sitting in the theater watching, and they're like, "Wait, is this fucking play about us?" It's a really elaborate, beautiful, show and performance. Ethan is playing a bunch of different characters and is eating every single role up. And Nate and Cassie make their debut as a couple, and they're sitting together watching this performance. Cassie leaves the theater in tears after there's a scene showcasing her and Maddie's friendship. And then Cassie comes back just in time to witness the Nate Jacobs homoerotic locker room scene, which causes Nate to leave and then break up with Cassie because her sister is the one that put on the show. And then this prompts Cassie to get up on stage and start bashing Lexi in front of everybody. And then their mom came up on stage to de-escalate the situation, but Cassie makes things worse by asking if this is the part of the play where she steals Maddie's boyfriend, and then now Maddie is involved. And then randomly the carnival scene starts playing where Cassie is like on the merry-go-round embarrassing herself, and Cassie freaks out and starts fighting with the actress who's portraying her. And then Maddie says, "Oh, this bitch needs to be put down," and gets up and starts slapping the shit out of Cassie. So then the play resumes after that little hiccup, and it was overall a success. Jules and Rue reunite night after the play and have a little moment. And here's the thing though, Fezco was supposed to be there front row and center with roses and a little card for Lexi because they had been talking for the past few months, but he couldn't make it because Faye's boyfriend, aka Mouse's right-hand man, showed up and he was tapped and working with the cops, and Ashtray freaked out and killed him in their house, and then their house got like stormed in by the police, and Ashtray, I guess he needed to go out fighting and got himself killed in the process, very stupidly so. Fezco was actually shot and detained, and Faye was also detained, and that was what was going on over there. And then Nate ended up visiting Cal, who was chilling in the unfinished home of one of his like construction zones with a bunch of his hookups, and Nate has Cal arrested. It's implied that it's because like of his filming of all the hookups and stuff. Nate and his daddy issues, man. He literally had recurring nightmares of Cal fucking him from behind, like one of his hookups, which is crazy. In the midst of all this drama and chaos, there was also this one long ass acoustic song that Elliot, aka Dominic Fike, performed to Rue, which was sweet, but man, in the moment when we were all watching this finale, I was like, Dominic, please, like I can't do this right now. It was a verse, a chorus, the bridge, a chorus again, the chorus again, like it just went on and on and on. Anyways, that's Euphoria. Did you have a good time? Was that, you know, totally normal show and experience for you? Did you know that Euphoria is actually based on a 2012 Israeli miniseries by the same name? Because I did not know that. They really don't have much in common apparently, but crazy. Okay, so now that you know all the lore, like let me introduce you to the cast and some of that drama. So firstly, it's interesting how many successful actors came out of the show. You know, we got Zendaya, Jacob Elordi, Sydney Sweeney, Hunter Schafer, like everyone is pretty much a big name now. And Zendaya, who plays Rue, has obviously been booked and busy recently, and you may be well aware that she and Tom Holland are together, but did you know that at one point her and Jacob Elordi, who plays Nate, were together? And so there are some rumors that that ended badly though. Another pair is Hunter Schafer, who plays Jules, and Dominic Fike, who played Elliot, and they were together, but he actually cheated on her, so that also ended badly. And Hunter and Zendaya are good friends, so they're in it, they're locked in, they're cool. Sydney Sweeney has had her fair share of controversies. She was super sexualized in the show, and her roles that she's had after that also kind of follow suit, and I feel like she's complained about that, you know, being typecast in a particular way. However, she has also made business moves leaning into that, like with her ad for a bar of soap, you know, made from her bath water. And then she justified that decision by saying she's like a struggling artist, essentially, and needs to pay her bills. So, you know, all types of things. The people found out that Maud Apatow, who plays Lexi, is a Nepo baby. And I probably said that last name wrong, and I don't even want to... Let's just move on. Barbie Ferreira... Oh, God. These last names are killing me, who plays Kat, recently lost a lot of weight and walked on the most recent Victoria's Secret runway thing, which I actually watched live, and that was the first time I ever did that. It was a really fun time. Alexa Demi, who plays Maddie Demi, she hasn't done as much as the rest of the cast, despite being, you know, such a main beloved character. She's older than the rest of the cast at 35 as opposed to 28, which all of the members are around that age. And there was actually a controversy regarding her because we ended up finding out that in one of her earlier roles, she had a kissing scene with a 13-year-old when she was 28 at the time, so that's crazy. Another thing to note is she released a song called Leopard Limo in, I believe, 2021, which people clowned on, and I will say it does not sound great. Like, I can see why the people were clowning on it, but you know, to each their own. I'm sure there's a bunch of people that love it as well. So now let's get into why people are kind of fed up with this show. So first of all, it's been 4 years since the last season was released. That's kind of a long time. Like, a person has fully gone through the entirety of high school or the entirety of college traditionally with the 4 years, so like lots can happen in 4 years. But the thing is that the time between seasons 1 and 2 was also like 3 years, so I guess it's not super unusual for this show at this rate, but you know, it started out as focusing on the lives of these high schoolers who are now practically 30. However, in season 3 there will be a 5-year time jump, which I guess would mean that they're at the end of college or maybe even just graduated, so we'll see how that goes. I'm curious to see what's going to happen with that. And so that's, you know, one of the reasons why people want the show to wrap up already, considering the amount of time it has taken in between these seasons for, you know, only 3 seasons of the show to be released. And it also seems like the actors want to move on and like do other things, and a few people within the main cast also won't be returning for various reasons. So they killed off Ashtray's character, like I mentioned, and Kat also won't be returning as a character, allegedly because the actress Barbie had created differences with the director and she didn't like the direction he was taking her character in, or he was kind of like neglecting her character, which I can see because that was even evident in season 2. And then really tragically, 2 of the actors in Euphoria's main cast have passed away since the second season. Eric Dane, who played Cal, passed away in February of this year due to ALS, although I do believe Cal actually will be in season 3 because they filmed it in 2025 before he passed. However, Angus Cloud, who played Fezco, died in 2023 from an accidental overdose when he was just 25, so he definitely will not be in season 3. And now Angus Cloud, the actor, was actually discovered by the casting director when he was working as a waiter. Like, he had no previous formal acting experience, which is impressive because he did really well as Fezco. I imagine like Fezco is similar to how he is as a person, but still, like, I don't know, I thought he did a really great job. However, I've seen some arguments right around the time that he passed where people were criticizing the fact that they pushed someone who was struggling, you know, with drug use and addiction into the limelight, which I guess I could see that point, but I also feel like it would have been a struggle regardless. So then we have a controversy with the director himself, Sam Levinson, who also directed the show The Idol, which, as you know, if you've ever seen it, is also in the same sort of fuckassery. His style seems to be a lot of like shock factor and nudity and crazy sexual scenarios and taboo. But like I said, allegedly he did have beef with Barbie, and he's also gotten some toxic workplace allegations, on top of the fact that allegedly the distinctive vibe and aesthetic of Euphoria was stolen. Apparently, Petra Collins claims that Sam Levinson hired her to develop the show based on her photography, and she worked on it for 5 months only to be dropped. But that would be a major snub, considering that Euphoria gets a lot of praise for its aesthetic, from the lighting to the makeup to the dreamlike quality of the shots. It's all very distinct. Another thing that made the show very distinct was its music. The artist Labyrinth did the music for Euphoria, and it slaps so hard. I really love his work. Highly recommend Nate Growing Up and Gangster. Those are my favorite songs from the soundtrack. But anyways, recently he posted this to Instagram. I'm done with this game. I'm just kidding. I'm done with this industry. Fuck Columbia. Double fuck Euphoria. I'm out. Thank you and good night. So it appears he got fucked over too. Also, the press for season 3 has been weird. The rumor going around is that Zendaya has refused to do anything with Sydney Sweeney. The poster for Euphoria season 3 also looks so different compared to the previous seasons. Like, it's just a whole mess up in here. And also, it's a shame because Euphoria has a lot of good things going for it, with a lot of talented people working on the show. Like, some of the shots in season 1 were so cool too. And also, the casting was amazing all around. But also, it seems like the show's been marked with a lot of tragedy, so I think people are ready for this chapter to come to a close. If season 3 is really crazy, maybe I'll make a video on that. I'm curious to see what they're going to do. I'm pretty much completely in the dark going into it, which is just the way I like it. I wish they did a little bit more with Nate and Jules. Like, I felt unsatisfied with the way that things kind of wrapped up with them. And that's not to say that I want them to end up together by any means, because I love Rue and Jules, but I feel like Nate and Jules could have been explored a bit more. And the reason that it wasn't explored as much, there's a rumor going around about that as well, saying that Hunter and Zendaya didn't want to work with Jacob too much because he allegedly cheated on Zendaya in their relationship, which might have caused the writers to pivot in a different direction because Hunter didn't want to really do a lot of scenes with him. But who knows even if that's true. I think that they completely nerfed Kat's character in season 2. She was just like an asshole for no reason. And I think that they didn't know what to do with her. And I'm kind of glad that Barbie ended up leaving if we were going to get kind of the same bullshit in season 3. And then, my god, I did not like what they did with Cassie. I mean, I never really liked her character because she's someone who always views herself as a victim and isn't faithful in her relationships, but somehow, like, she ends up being the victim in every single scenario. However, she was on another level in season 2, and it seemed like she was so desperately clinging on to the fact that she was hooking up with her best friend's ex-boyfriend and not her current boyfriend, as if that makes a big difference in this sort of scenario, which it definitely doesn't. You have your best friend who has confided into you about her toxic, abusive relationship. He cheats on her with you, even though they weren't together, but like, why would you even want to get yourself involved with that? We will see what happens. Let me know what your thoughts are on Euphoria. If you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, let me know your thoughts, because I'm sure that must have been like a crazy experience for you just now. Also, if there's any major drama that I missed or something that happened currently, let me know. I know that they're doing I think the red carpet for Euphoria was just literally like a couple days ago, and it seemed like Zendaya, like, she literally got in and got out. Either she had other obligations or she was trying to be there as little as possible. Like, I don't know. I also don't know if this is confirmed to be the last season of Euphoria. I feel like it's kind of hesitantly confirmed to be the last season, but who knows at this rate. I hope it is. And that's not because I don't like the show. It's just because, you know, I feel like it's time. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe. Give me a follow on Instagram if you want to get a little bit more up close and personal with me. But yeah, I love y'all. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.